وعليكم السلام
Inshallah,
ورحمة الله وبركاته.
today we're going to start our new talk. Our talk for today is going to be weakness of the Muslim Ummah. Like we discussed in the previous class, in the previous talk, we talked about what has happened, or what is still happening in the Palestinian or to the Palestinians. And the challenge has been the fact that there are some weaknesses from the Muslim side. Inshallah, we decided to have a talk today. The talk is going to be what is the weakness of the Muslim Ummah, general totality, which has led to what has been happening to the Muslim Ummah entirely. We pray that inshallah the person that is going to give us the today's topic is scholarship today. Inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
So, وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته. So, assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. So, as the chairman has rightly said, our topic for discussion today is the weakness of the Muslim Ummah, or the Ummah's weakness, its causes and factors. And as he explained, that the situation in Gaza, in Palestine, shows us how weak we are as a nation, Islamically, as a nation, as a Muslim nation, or the Islam nation. Gaza has been invaded by the Israeli, the Zionist entity of Israel since October 7, and by today it should be over, let's see, over 43 days since the invasion has started, and over 11 million people have been killed, and over 11,000 people have been killed, and over 30,000 people have been wounded. And among those killed, majority of them are women and children. Uh, Despite this, the Muslims globally did not see it as a necessity for them to stop, or for us to stop this atrocity that is being perpetrated by the Zionist entity. Just of recent, yesterday night, one of the schools that is being organized by the UN in one of the refugee camp in Palestine, the Israeli or the Zionist entity bombed that place, and over 200 children were killed just yesterday. And this goes on. And we have Muslims, Muslim leaders across the globe. We have Jordan, we have Egypt, we have Saudi Arabia, Iran, Iraq, the whole of North Africa, and there is no single nation that is standing up to stop the Zionists from these atrocities that they are perpetrating. So we see that from this action of theirs, that there is a problem within us, and this problem is not something that just started yesterday. This problem has been on since even before the destruction of the Islamic State in 1924. So that's why today we want to look at the causes of this problem, this weakness. Why is it that we are so weak despite our number, despite the resources that we control, despite our wealth? We are so weak that we can't stand, or we can't ask for our rights. So what's the cause? So inshallah today we want to look at some of the factors that led to the weakness of the woman. And we have to go back in time to see where this problem started. As doctors, if someone has a disease, it has to be diagnosed to discover the cause of the disease before you can think of the cure. If you take your car to the mechanic, for example, they have to look for the cause of the problem. If the cause of the problem is not discovered, every remedy, every repair that is being made will make you still return back to the mechanic workshop. So if we not discover or determine the cause of our weakness, we just keep in one cycle, and we will not be able to get a solution to our problem. Now, we need to understand that the Islamic State, when we talk of the Islamic State, the state that is being controlled by Muslims and being and the law of Allah is being implemented upon it. Today, we don't have any Islamic state. We only have Muslim countries because the law of Allah is not what is being implemented upon any of the country. It could be partially, maybe in terms of the law of marriage, inheritance, but it's not completely. Now, the Islamic state that was set up by the Prophet ﷺ in Medina is a state that derives its strength from the ideology of the state. It derives its strength from Islam. Just like as we know, as Umar bin Khattab said, that we Muslims were weak, that it was Islam that made us strong. So we need to understand that it's Islam that made the early Muslims, gave them their strength, not the early Muslims that gave Islam its strength. And that is what we are missing now. We don't have that Islam, and that is why we don't have that strength in order to protect ourselves and protect Muslims that are suffering across the globe. And if we go back, um, we go back in memory to the time of the Prophet, the time of the Khulafa, Rashidun, even the Umayyad, the Abbasid, we will discover how strong the Muslims were. Within 100 years, Muslims were able to cover a very large amount of land across the globe. Within about 30 years that the Khulafa Rashidun ruled, Muslims were able to conquer the places like the Levant, which is present-day Syria, and where Palestine is today. Were able to conquer Iraq, Iran, and some parts of Egypt. By the time we got to the Umayyad, which is about they used about 60 to 80 years to rule, Islam covered the whole of North Africa. It reached as far as Spain in Europe and went as far as India in South Asia. So you could see that the Muslims were able to conquer land despite the fact that what they had then were just horses, bows, and arrows. They didn't have the ammunitions that we have today. And why were they this strong? What gave them this power? It is because they had Islam, they carried the Sunnah, the Quran, and the Arabic language. And this will be, when we talk about us being weak now, if we go back in history, that what has gone wrong, you see that it is somehow contrary to things that have happened before. We know that Muslims before, the early Muslims, were champions in terms of scientific discoveries. And why were they champions in terms of scientific discoveries? It's because when they come across ayahs in the Quran or statement of the Prophet Sallallahu, it motivates them to act and motivates them to seek discovery. So, for example, in the ayah of Suratul Furqan, where Allah explains to us that He has made two seas, the saltwater sea and the freshwater sea. And Allah says He has placed a barrier in between them. A barrier that there is no how that this water can avoid it, they must separate. This led Muslims to explore the sea. Okay, let's go into the sea. Let's go and find out this barrier. How come that we don't know about it? It made Muslims to explore. It made Muslims to be the leader in terms of the naval or the navy, to the extent that even some words were linked to Arabic. For example, when we hear of admiral, for example, admiral means is gotten from Arabic, which is Amirul Bahr, which is the Amir or the leader of the sea, and that is where admiral was gotten from. It changed from Arabic to Italian to French, then to English. So you could see this linkage that the Muslims of those days, what the Quran made them to seek for knowledge and made them to excel. Unlike us today, instead of making the Quran to making us to seek for knowledge, rather we are using knowledge to authenticate the Quran. We are doing the opposite. Now we say, okay, they've discovered that within the womb of the woman there are about 3 layers of that is protecting the baby. That because that even in the Quran says so and so. That means the Quran is authentic. This is contrary to what the early Muslims did. What the early Muslims did was when they learned something, they go and search for it, they make discoveries. And that's why early Muslims were the leaders in scientific discoveries. Even some things like in mathematics, we are used to when we're in secondary school, logarithm. This logarithm is from a Muslim scholar whose name is Al Khawarizm. Is actually from somewhere in I think Uzbekistan, and he created the science of algorithm. Algorithm has to do with a step-by-step approach to solve problem, and this science of algorithm is what is being used in creating computer of today, because computer is from computer programming, and programming has to do with step-by-step approach to solve a problem. So you could see the effects or the work that early Muslims did, and it makes us wonder that okay, that why are we so backward now? Why is it that every discovery is from the West and very little discovery is from the Muslim land? What is the cause of our problem? And so now when we move forward, one of the major cause of our problem has to do with the enemies of Islam identifying that the strength in Muslims in Islam is actually the Quran and the Sunnah, is actually the teachings of Islam. That if these teachings can be adulterated, Muslims will lose their strength. So when they identify that, see, we've fought with these people for thousands of years, we could not defeat them. That there is something that is motivating them, and they discover that it is the Quran and the Sunnah. That these books of Allah, this is where they are gaining their strength from. So if we alterate it, we will probably be able to defeat them. So this was where this kind of thing started from. But as we know that Allah has promised that He's going to protect the Quran, that the Quran will be protected till the end of time. So they've never achieved this. But for the hadiths of the prophets, the sayings of the Prophet, sallallahu they tried in fabricating hadiths, some big hadiths, some lies against the prophet, some things that are similar to what the prophet has said, but they know that it's going to deviate Muslims from the right path. But despite all these efforts, the early Muslims were able to counter this action. This is because the state then was still strong. When the Muslims discovered that that there are some weak hadiths being that people are saying around, and that we have to look for ways of identifying which hadith is correct, which hadith is wrong. That was when the science of hadith came about, and Muslim scholars made great efforts in doing collection of hadiths. The likes of Imam Buhari had to travel across the Muslim lands. He traveled across the Muslim lands looking for the narrator or the co-narrator of hadiths, linking them up to ensure that okay, each hadith is correct and each hadith is connected to the person that narrated it. And they made great efforts in doing this such that they limited the hadith collections to just 3 centuries after the prophet. For about after 300 years after the prophet, anybody that says a narrator, they just discard that. And they were able to preserve the hadiths of the prophet. So this did not have much negative effect against the Muslims. But we could see that due to the strength of the state then, because the state was ideological in the sense that anywhere the Muslims conquer, they carry the Quran, the Sunnah, and the Arabic language along with them, to the extent that even non-Arabs became experts in Arabic, because we might be surprised to hear that the likes of Imam Abu Hanifa, for example, is from Persia. He's not an Arab, but is an expert in Arabic language. This is because when the Muslims conquered land, they carried this Arabic language along with them, and it was part of the curriculum of the state, whereby everybody had to learn it. And even Imam Buhari too is not an Arab; he's from somewhere in Asia. I can't. I want to remember. Okay, yes, he's from present day Uzbekistan, and they were able to understand, teach, and uh, do ijtihad because they understand Arabic language, despite the fact that they were not Arabs. So this shows how the Muslims of those days, how this we are able to protect Islam and able to ensure that the state retains its strength. And to also emphasize the great attention that is being given to Arabic language, because even then, when non-Muslims could not uh, understand Arabic, the likes of Imam Shafi, he disallowed the translation of Arabic. He said it's not allowed for you to translate Arabic. To the translation of Quran, that is not allowed because you have to read the Quran with the language that is being revealed. And he also disallowed praying, just your dua, Rabbana atina fid dunya hasanatan, praying in any language other than Arabic. That you have to use the language that was being revealed. But later, when Imam Abu Hanifa made a ruling on this, he allowed the Quran to be translated, but he said the translation of the Quran is not should not be called the Quran. It should just be called translation or the meaning of the Quran. So that you cannot call the translation the Quran. So you cannot replace the English, the translated text of the Quran with the Arabic text. So this shows the importance that the Arabic language played and how the state protected the language. And also, we have to understand that in solving any problem, Islam has provided a mechanism or a science called ijtihad. Ijtihad has to do with studying the problem on ground, looking for the Islamic text that talks about this problem and providing a solution to it. And this ijtihad, it cannot be done except with Arabic language because it's only Arabic language that you can use to understand the text fully. So, for example, you have a new problem that was not in existence before. During the time of the Prophet or during the time of the Khulafa, there was nothing like insurance before, or there was nothing like cryptocurrency. All these, what's the name? Uh, Example, give me example of one cryptocurrency. Bitcoin. There was nothing like Bitcoin. So, as Muslim scholars, each tell has to be done on this new problem. Okay, is it allowed for Muslims to do it, or is it not allowed? So the Bitcoin has to be studied. It has to be studied extensively. You know the characteristics, know why it should be allowed or why it should not be allowed. And part of what they say is that okay, that the uncertainty in it is so much. And in Islam, you don't deal with trade that has to do with lot of uncertainty, a lot of risk. That is one of the reasons why, and also that Bitcoin is being controlled by some very few set of people. And currency should not be something that is being controlled by some current few set of people. So I'm not passing an issue on this, but I'm just trying to explain that this problem will be studied, and the Shari text, the Quran, the Sunnah, Ijma, Sahaba, and Qiyas will be looked into to see how to solve this particular problem. This was how the early Muslims solved problem that kept occurring. Because as humans, problem must keep occurring. You must always have new situations. There was nothing like cell phone before. Is a cell phone now. So can this cell phone be used or not? Is it allowed to use it to to maybe can I use it to teach somebody Quran? Is it allowed because it's made by the Kufa or not? So scholars will have to do ijtihad on things like this because these are new situations that is occurring among the Muslims. But this knowledge of ijtihad or this concept of ijtihad kept the Muslims kept it and it was being utilized for a long time. The Abbasid, the Umayyad, they were doing ijtihad. But as Islam kept progressing, as Islam kept expanding, it got to a stage that Islam fell into the hands of those that did not take care of the Arabic language. So you can see that our emphasis now is on the Arabic language. Islam got to the hands of people that did not take good care of the Arabic language. It fell into the hands of the Ottomans. The Ottomans are Turks by origin, and they were actually strong. They actually uh, helped in uniting the Muslim Ummah because before the Ottoman came, the Mongols have ransacked Baghdad, destroyed the Abbasid Caliphate, and the Muslims were just wandering without single leadership. And the Ottomans came with their strength. They were able to take over lands back for Islam, and they were able to unite the Muslims back and spread Islam to other parts of the world. So they did this perfectly well in terms of conquering land and spreading Islam. But one thing that the Ottomans were failed in doing was preserving this Arabic language. They didn't take the Arabic language into consideration. They didn't take it that serious. So the strength of the Arabic language was being lost, and the Arabs were just given. They were left with just occupations like teaching, just go and be teaching, and it was not used as a scholarly language such that solutions will be gotten through the Arabic language. And since the strength of the Arabic language was lost, the Muslims now failed in solving the problems, the day-to-day problems that occur to them. And this is one of the biggest disaster that happened to the Muslims. And it led to one particular event that if we analyze this event critically, we'll discover that is one of the biggest negative things that happened to the Ottomans that led to the destruction of the state. And what is it? It has to do with the printing press. The Ottomans banned the printing of Quran. And to explain this, we have to uh, look at the printing press in details. The printing press has to do with printing books with machine, and you print them on paper. Now, historically, we know that in the past there was nothing like paper, but there was a substance that was called papyrus, which was actually discovered in Egypt. And papyrus, they get plants, they cut them into stripes, and they arrange them across like this. They roll it together, then it stick, so they can write on it. But this particular kind of paper, it cannot be folded. You cannot fold it because if you fold it, it will break. So what they do is that they just roll it. So that's why we used to have scrolls then, like the Torah and the rest were written in scrolls. And this was what the technology that was being used for a long period of time. Even in the time of the prophets, some of the writings of the Quran were on papyrus, some were on leather, and some were on stones. But these things are not preservable for a long time because like papyrus can decay. So after a long time, it will you will not even see what you've written again. Everything will decompose. Then the technology of paper was invented in China. And we have to understand that what the Chinese did then was they made it secretive, such that those that knew how to do this paper, they did not allow others to be aware of the method of manufacturing it, so that they can restrict the paper to themselves. So anybody that needs paper must get it from China. But as Allah would have it, during that period of time, the Abbasid, one of the Abbasid Khalifa, went on a war against some places in western China, and I think the battle is called Battle of Tolas, and it defeated the Chinese there and captured some people as prisoners. When these prisoners were being captured, they discovered that two of them knew how to make paper, and they now say, okay, instead of collecting ransom for these two. They say, no, we are not going to collect ransom for them. That the ransom that they are going to pay is that they will teach the Muslims how to make paper. We could see that what the Abbasid did is similar to what the Prophet ﷺ did earlier in after the Battle of Badr, when he captured some prisoners, and rather than collecting ransom to release them, he said the prisoners, if they can teach 10 Muslims how to read and write, they'll be freed. So that was their ransom. This is transfer of knowledge. And it's the same thing that the Abbasid did. They transferred the knowledge to the Muslim land. And from there, paper manufacturing started spreading wide. The Muslims did not restrict this paper manufacturing to just the set of people that knew it, but they made it open. Everybody can come and learn, and the knowledge went wide. And from record, they said the Muslim land was exporting paper to other parts of the world, and different varieties of paper were being made. So this was at the golden age of Islam. But now, when we fast track forward to I think in 14, I want to get the date. Okay, around 1440. This is during the Ottoman time. This was when printing press was made. All this while, the paper, anything you need to write on paper, you have to write it with your hand. So the Quran was written with hand, and the books were written with hand. They were just manuscript. They were not printed. But around 1440, one German inventor in name of Gutenberg, he invented printing press. The printing press has to do with machine that you don't need to, if you want to print on a paper, you just get some of the characters, you put ink on them, and you arrange them, you roll the paper, and that paper is written on. So if you want to make duplicates of it, 100 copies of it, you just roll 100 copies once you've arranged these characters correctly. So you can see that to make large production of books was now easier. And one of the things that he did as soon as he was able to manufacture this paper was, and this printing press, he used it in the printing of the Bible. So one of the earliest, it was even the earliest Bible that was being made, then the Gutenberg Bible. He used it in the printing of the mass-produced Bible. Then when news now came to the Ottomans that people want to start using printing press in the Ottoman Caliphate. The Sultan then, Sultan Bayazid, he declared that no, that printing press should not be used, and he banned it. He made it haram that anyone that uses it or anybody that imports it will be executed, will be killed. This was in 1484. And we could wonder why. It is the main reason is because of the lack of utilization of the of ijtihad to understand that this printing press, even though they used it in printing Bible, it is what we call modernia, it is civilization. Muslims are allowed to acquire civilizations from other cultures. They are acquired to material civilization from other cultures. Just as Umar bin Khattab did when lands of Persia was being opened by the Muslims, and the Muslims increased in number. So to take record of Muslims, the armies was difficult. Muslims were not aware of how to keep record. And he was aware that the Persians had a kind of register that is called Dawawin, and he acquired it. That let's use this Dawawin, let's use it to keep record of our soldiers, their their payment, the number of our camels, our horses, and everything. He acquired the Dawawin from the Persian, and the Muslims were using this Dawawin till later, even up to the time of the Abbasid. Because as I learned that even the paper, when the Muslims produced paper then in large quantity, all the Dawari records that were on papyrus, they converted everything to paper. So, but coming forward, during the time of the Ottomans, the printing press was now banned because this is an invention from the non-Muslims. So they believe that because it's from non-Muslims, Muslims cannot use it. So you can see that this is as a result of the weak application of Ijtihad or the wrong application of the Ijtihad. And this shows the decline that the Muslims had, which is linked to the weakness in the understanding of Arabic language because the state didn't carry Arabic language as the language of the state then. And it made the scholars weak, and the doors of Ijtihad were closed. The scholars were not finding solutions to new problems, so they couldn't solve this simple problem of the printing press. And this problem lingered on for a long period of time because I made to understand that even in 1515, the previous one was 1485. So 1515, that's about 30 years later, another Sultan, Salim, also decreed that anybody caught with the printing press in the Ottoman land will be executed. I say, and anyone caught with a printed book will also be punished. So it was not until 1520 when the Jews, we had Jews in the Ottomans, in the Muslim land, Jews and Christians. These were Jews that were being persecuted in Andalusia, present day Spain. So they had to flee, and the Muslims accommodated them, and they came to the Muslim land. So this in 1520, the Jews now had to petition the Sultan that when we were in Andalusia, we had printing press that we used to use to print our books. But now that we've come here, you say we cannot use it. So they had to petition the Sultan that no, that he should allow them to use the printing press. And what the Sultan now decreed then is that, okay, that the Christians and the Jews can use it because this printing press is from them, but they should use it to only print their own books, and it should only be for them, and Muslims are not allowed to use it. And this action had real negative effects on the Muslims because this made the Jews can print and they can read books from the printing press. The Muslims, once the book is printed, it's forbidden for you to read it. So it makes the Jews and the Christians more educated in the Muslim land, such that, and this lingered on for about 300 years. You could imagine that if we are not allowed to use cell phone for just 1 year, you could imagine the amount of loss that would have made in terms of communication, in terms of education. discovery, we don't know what is even happening across the world. The Muslims were sidelined by the Muslim leaders themselves for about 300 years, and the Jews were allowed because of the wrong application of Ijtihad. And the Jews were now the leaders in terms of education, discoveries. They were leading the Muslims in every field in the Islamic State. So we could see the backwardness that the Muslims would have allowed themselves. If we bring it to Nigerian perspective, before independence, when the British came with education, and most of the schools were missionary schools. Our forefathers then, because they don't want us to fall, they don't want our fathers to fall into the hands of the Christians to convert them, they did not allow them to go to these missionary schools. And you could see this affected the level of education when you compare Muslims to non-Muslims, even in the South, not to talk of comparing the South to the North, to the extent that after independence, over 70% of people in this federal civil service were Igbos because they were the one that were the most educated then. This is just within a short period of time. Now, if you now compare to about 300 years, so we could imagine the kind of loss that the Muslims would have faced in terms of education for this single action. Then, if we now go forward, not until 1720, where a Hungarian-born Ottoman, his name is Ibrahim Mutafarrika, he was actually born from Hungary, but he migrated into the Ottoman land. He accepted Islam and he rose to become a minister, and he became very influential. So in 1720, he had to petition the Grand Mufti. Now, petitioning the Grand Mufti, petitioning the Sultan, will also make us understand some things regarding the structure of the state. What the West will tell you is that the Islamic State is authoritarian, that the Caliph has every power to do everything. But from these incidents that happen, we'll discover that within the state we have what we call the Qadi Muzalim, which is the Qadi of unjust acts. When the Sultan or the Wali, the governors, or any government official has perpetrated any act bad against the citizen has a right to take this official to this court, this judge, in order to judge against the person in authority. So you could see that from this act of petitioning the Sultan, petitioning the Grand Mufti, the the uh, the Sultan is not authoritarian in the sense that he has power to do everything. Even these decrees that were being made, it is the Grand Muftis, the sheikhs that had to look for uja evidence for this kind of decrees that were being made. Now, returning back to Ibrahim Mutafarika, in 1720, he had to petition the Grand Mufti and had to explain that, see, that this printing press that is not allowed in the Muslim land, that is is going to affect us negatively intellectually, not knowing that it has even affected the Muslims negatively. That it will affect us negatively, that the non-Muslims will be the one acquiring all the knowledge, they will be the one disseminating the knowledge, they'll be the one in the position of authority, they will be the one making discoveries, scientific discoveries, that the Muslims will be left behind. That because of this, he wants the Grand Mufti to allow the Muslims to have a printing press. Now, though, due to his petition, the Grand Mufti allowed, but he still made three conditions. The first condition is that nothing should be done in Arabic. The printing press, it should be done. You can write books, Islamic books, or not even Islamic books. You can write scientific books, maybe in geography, biology, or the rest, but it should not be in Arabic. One. Secondly, it should not. It should have nothing to do with Islam. Don't write hadith, Quran, tafsir. Then thirdly, it should be just government approved books. So these were the conditions that were being laid down for the Muslims, and the Muslims had to just abide by it. And we might be wondering that, okay, then when did this printing press get to the Muslim land? Because even explained that the first Qurans that were printed in non-Muslim lands. And if we can recollect, when we see old copies of Islamic books, we'll be seeing places like maybe Beirut, London, Rome, places that is not fully Islamic land. And this is because it is outside Islamic land, that these printing press were allowed. So, and it's been explained that it's not until when Napoleon came to conquer Egypt in around 17, I think 80 something. That was when he came with the printing press. He conquered Egypt, but he could not rule for long because the people had to reject his rule. There were so many uh, civil disturbances, internal disturbances. He had to leave. But when he left, the printing press was left. That was how the Muslims had the first hand to print books in Muslim land. And it is not until when the state was being um, disintegrated that printing press was now established in core Muslim lands. So you could see that this action of lack of proper utilization of Ijtihad, this is just an example of printing press. There are so many other examples that are taking Muslims back intellectually and has caused weakness among Muslims intellectually, such that we are not able to solve our problem, and it now made Muslims to rely solely on Western ideas, Western solutions, believing that it is Islam that made us not to not to be able to solve day-to-day problem. So this is on the intellectual point of view. Another cause of our weakness has to do with the looking at it politically. Now, looking at it politically, Muslims have been right from inception. There've always been this internal fight among Muslims. The Umayyad, the Abbasids come, they fight against the Umayyad for a long time till they overthrow them and they took over the power. The Ottomans also did that. And one of the key reasons for all this is the misapplication of transfer of leadership that has occurred since the time of Muawiyah. You know that when the Prophet ﷺ died, the Muslims appointed Abu Bakr. It was not the Prophet ﷺ that appointed Abu Bakr. It was the Muslims that selected Abu Bakr. Whereby when the Muslims in the Ansar in Medina said, okay, that the Prophet is no more, that when the Prophet was here to rule, to govern us, now there is no more. Let's select someone from among ourselves to champion this cause, at least to take over this leadership. And the Majeruns from Mecca had to make them aware that, see, Arabs respect the Quraysh, that we need somebody that has this charisma that will, of respect, that once he's there, every other Arab nation will respect him. And it's this kind of figure that we need to lead the Muslims for now. Not because it is only Quraysh that are liable to become leadership. It's just because at this moment it is the Quraysh that the Arabs respect them. So because of that, rather than the Ansar looking for someone among themselves, let them look for someone among the Muhajirin, the Quraysh, to lead. And as soon as he said that, somebody now say, I nominate Abu Bakr. Umar said, okay, yes, I nominate Abubakar. And that was how Abubakar was nominated and he became the caliph. So we could see that the Prophet Sallallahu did not transfer this to Abubakar. And after Abubakar, when he was about to die, he wanted the Muslims came to meet him that see, you can see that you're sick, you're about to die, that no, choose somebody for us. And he uh, he did not actually want to agree. But when they were persistent that okay, we've placed this our right, we've placed the right on you. We know that it's our right to choose our leader. We've placed on you that help us to choose our leader. And Abubakar still had to do some investigations within that okay, who is the preferred choice among the Muslims? And the preferred choice was between Umar and Ali. But he saw that most people preferred Umar, and that was how he chose Umar. But it was not until he died before the Muslims gave Umar the bayah. And this happened in time of Umar too. He selected six Sahabas that they should choose among themselves who should become the Khalifa. Even Umar, the Muslims asked him that he should choose, and he refused. They said, "Ah, but Abubakar choose." He said, that shouldn't I do what someone better than Abubakar did? That the Prophet Sallallahu didn't choose. That so let me not choose. He just selected six people that okay, from among you, select somebody among yourself that will lead. So we could see that the transfer of leadership in Islam is not through inheritance. But when it now got to the point of when Muawiyah got the leadership, he had to impose his son on the Muslims. And this continues such that it's either a son, a brother, an uncle that becomes the Khalifa that gets the leadership. And it led to internal um, conflict among the Muslims. Muslims now say, okay, for us, we cannot, because it is something that is open that every Muslim can aspire to become a leader. And that's how, there's no how we can become leaders except we forcefully take over this mantle of leadership. And that was what led to all these military fight among the Muslims and the Umayyad lost it to the Abbasid up to the Ottomans, and even among the Ottomans, it was still along along family line. So this is one of the biggest weakness that the Muslims had, that caused the weakness of the Muslims. And for us to correct this, when the state is being returned, re-established, so mistakes like this will have to be avoided. The language, the Arabic language, will have to be protected, and the transfer of leadership will have to be by the Ummah. It is the Ummah that will appoint, that will select the leader, not to line of not to the family line. Now, apart from this, there are other causes of weakness that we still have to look in details later, like the missionary invasion and the invasion from the Western world. So we'll still look at all this later. But this, what we've just gone through, is the basics, is the core cause of this weakness that we are having today, such that Muslims in the world do not see themselves as one, and we are not able to solve this simple problem of Palestine. And we have problems of Muslims across the globe. We have the Rohingya Muslims in the place that is called Burma, or they call Myanmar now. We have the Uyghur Muslims in China. We have Muslims in Kashmir, in Pakistan. Muslims are facing persecution in different parts of the land, and there's no authority to protect the Muslims because we've lost the authority. And we have to work to regain this authority. So this is talk for today. May Allah accept our presentation and forgive us of our shortcomings. Assalamu alaikum to wa alaikum assalam to
Yeah, alhamdulillah. We thank God we are few today, and I would say even the talk so is short, but it's the kind of talk that is very, very educative, inshallah. And in order to give more chances for comments and questions, inshallah, then we will try to look at what the speaker said about the topic. We are discussing the weaknesses of the Muslim Ummah, which has we look at the challenges that Muslims are facing globally. We find out that the Muslim leaders are unable to do anything serious to save the Ummah. Whether it depends on how we take them, whether they are our true leaders. First and foremost, you say this cause the weakness is started from the Muslims themselves, and which the first thing is the Muslim intentional on their own side close the door of ijtihad. They refuse to do ijtihad. When we're talking about ijtihad, we're talking about research. People do research. If there's any problem that just arise, and make mention of something, problem like, let's say, this current things that are coming up, like cryptocurrency and so on, that there is a need for ijtihad, research, to find out whether this thing is permissible or not what permissible, whether it's halal or haram or mubah. So as at that time, the Muslim close the door of what ijtihad, even during the Khilafah. And the loss of what Arabic language, maybe because of the fear that Arabic language has been the only unified language since during the time of the Prophet Muhammad
Yes, sir.
and we have that there are some parts of the world now, countries that we see, that we thought maybe they are Arabians. They are not Arabians. For instance, like Egypt, right? Egyptians, the, they are kids, right?
Copts.
Copts, they call them Copts. The Persians too, the Iranians and the
Iraqi.
Iraq, they are not Arabians. So, but Islam unified them because we have one single language. But the use of Arabic language was actually not used because of use again, probably because of sentiment, especially when it comes to during the time of the Ottomani uh, um, Khilafat at that time when they took over the power. So it created a very serious problem to the point that this Ishihad again, something that is so simple, the Muslim do not do research to know whether the printing of the Quran has become a problem. They stop it. It's a problem. They need to do a research for it, whether to print the Quran using printing press. But they stop it because they've already closed the door of Isha. That case, this led to the loss of knowledge. Some of the knowledge that people are supposed to derive. Meanwhile, the other parts of the world that the non-Muslims are going further, they are increasing in knowledge because as at that time, the printing press is one of the major things, major way of passing what the information. But the Muslims intentionally denied themselves in this case because there was no ijtihad. Again, the one other part that is so much important is the misapplication of what of leadership. We all know that during the time of the Prophet Muhammad,
Yes, sir.
the Muslims converged in one place, right? To to the point that they did not even bury the Prophet Muhammad
Yes, sir.
3 days to ensure that who is going to succeed the Prophet to become the Khalifa. And at the end, they appointed Abu
Abu
Bakr,
Bakr.
right? In the Prophet himself did not directly, right, say, okay, if I after my death, Abu Bakr should what take over. Then after the death, after when during the Abu Bakr is about to leave, when or let's say after the death of Abu Bakr, Umar too was was also appointed, right? Not that Abubakar say, Umar, take over me. So this is the process to choose, the other way to choose the best knowledge, to choose the best person that can take over and lead the Ummah. So this misapplication started during the time of Muawiyah radiallahu anhu, when he insisted that his son Yazid must have to be what the next Khalifa, and that is it caused very serious what problem to the point that we see a kind of group that will just come up as kind of a rebellion. It's now look as if that is our system of what transferring what leadership
Leadership.
when someone is already in power. So to transfer leadership, some
Mm,
people, some set of people have to
must
come up,
fight.
fight just like military, right? Hijack it and then and continue. Till to the time of this Habasi and Umayyad, it was how it continued to the point that it now come the leadership now come to the Uthmani uh, Khilafah. So we used to call it empire. It was an Khilafah. So as during the Uthmani Khilafah, there was so many misapplications of Islam to the point that when they look at it, they see it as if it's an empire. So the misapplication of the Sharia, the interpretation of the deen is one of the major problems. Like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, if I input to if I'm correct, now, if you have done the right thing, if you return to it, if you do the right thing, you will do the right thing, you will do what you want for you. And what is going on in Palestine now? Because there's one word that's showing that if the Muslims are ready to what? To work, meaning to do jihad, to do the right thing, to return back to this to the system we have put them in before. Allah is ready to make the Muslim succeed. What is the system? The Khilafah system. That is the only way the Muslim can work, can succeed. So, and that's why you see, he said yesterday, over 200 children were killed. Students, right? Pupils
Children in UN
were
school.
killed. It's a lot of the missiles thrown by what? By
Israel.
the Israelites. That the point is just that they want to finish the children. Their target is the what? Is the children. They know that if they finish the children, well, who are the ones that will grow up to take over? And you see, this thing, and we have these leaders that are there. They are just looking. They don't even do because they already signed a kind of peace treaty with the Israel. So that's where the Muslims are. So let not be as if we are giving another talk. And inshallah, we will give time, chance for comments and questions. So if there's any comment, please let us go ahead. I also have questions.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi
Oh,
wabarakatuh.
alaikum salam.
Jazakallah khairan to our speaker. He was going into so many specific details on the causes of Muslim weakness. I just want to comment by way of adding two quick points, which are not far from what our speakers said. If we look at the Muslims of the past, three instances I want to make reference to. We all know that today we have some Muslims in France who are native Frenchmen. How did they become Muslims? They become Muslims because of past historical antecedents of the Muslims when the Khilafah was in place. And somewhere around eastern France, Nantes, Nice, and all this, they have a king, as we all know of the French people, and their king was abducted. The way we have the kidnappers of today. And the abductors of the king, they asked the Frenchmen from the eastern France, that not eastern France, that they should pay a ransom before their king could be released to them. And they cannot afford to pay this ransom. And these native Frenchmen, they wrote to the Khilafah because they see the Muslims as a superpower, as at that time. That can you please help us to get our king back? And the king placed him on their head, the Muslim soldier. to go and rescue the king. And he defeated the kidnappers, rescued the king, and returned the king to them. Then they asked the Caliph, what are we going to pay you? The Caliph said, oh, everybody should live free life the way it's supposed to be. He said, if this is your religion, if this is your way of life, we accept it. That was the way we have native Frenchmen in Northeast France as Muslims today. The second occasion, today we all talk about the Muslims of China, the Uyghurs, the way they are being persecuted and everything. Have we asked ourselves, how do we get Muslims in China? It was the same situation. Because the Chinese, they always fight international war, the Fulani, they are fighting themselves. And they also kidnap their king. And they also wrote to the Khilafah, can you please help us to get our king back? Just like in France, the Khalifa raised the Mujahid, who rescued the king and returned the king. And he said, from today, we will all become Muslim. That was the way we have the Muslims in China. If you now look at it, we Muslims who are superpower, who was superpower before. Now today, before I left home, I was watching Al Jazeera in Palestine, Israel, this thing. I became very emotional. I switched to BBC. The next thing I saw was the crisis in Sudan. The revolutionary soldier forces and the military. The only line that by which they bring food to Sudan, which was a bridge that linked to Port Sudan, they are blocking it, so the bridge is no longer there. That means hunger. Muslims fighting themselves. If you are switching from one station to another station, that's the situation of Muslims, and we became weak. Aside all the points that our speakers have mentioned, two things from historical point of view. The first one is what we all know today that still exists today, and that is Asadia, the issue of nationality, identity, and Yoruba, you are Nobe, I'm Nigerian, you are Nigerian, you are this. Because as the speaker has rightly mentioned, even as at today, I can tell you, if you get to Istanbul in Turkey, you will hardly see any of the Islamic material, including in Arabic. They were only in Turkish. The only thing is when they pray, they recite Fatiha, they recite other surah, but in their lecture and everything is in Turkish. Because why? They said, let us promote Turkish. We are Turkish first, before being feeling about Islam or Muslims. So when the Khilafah gets to Turkey, and when Islam continued to get being eroded, the understanding of Islam, the issue of Asabiya became so strong that even the leaders of the Muslim in the Ottoman Empire in Turkey, they raised the status of the Turkish than any other person. Even if you are Arab, you are second-class citizen of it. If you are Turkish, you are number one. And that was the reason when the young Turks, because they were not exposed to all the modern technology and the whole thing, France did the young Turks under the leadership of Mustafa Kemal. That everybody in Turkey celebrates today that, oh, the founder of modern day Turkey. He was very young, 18, 20, 21. France organized the kind of scholarship they organized for us to be. The young Turks took them to Paris, got them in the hotel, making presentations to them that is because you people, you restrict yourself to Islam. That was why you are so backward. You can see life here. And when they get back to Turkey, they begin the revolution from within. They are attacking all their leaders, all the Khalifa and everybody. And they were the one that the Europeans used to make sure that the Khilafah gets destroyed. And that was how Mustafa Kemal became the president and the founder of modern day Turkey. It was established that when Mustafa Kemal became the leader, all Muslims all over the world, they went to him. And Mustafa Kemal, okay, if it is power you want, you are now the leader of Turkey. We want to give bay'ah to you so that you become the Khalifa. What was the response of Mustafa Kemal? He said, I'm not interested in the problem of the Muslims all over the world. I'm only interested in the affair of the Turk. The Turks, I want to make the Turks number one in the world. So forget it, I'm not interested in it. So if you look at it, you can see the issue of identity, Sabiya, and then the loss of the political leadership. That was what made us to find ourselves in this situation. And you can still see, I'm Nigerian, you are Nigeria, you are Burkina Faso, you are this, you are that. It's still there today. Nigeria is still there. And the second one, we don't have any political leadership. OIC, Organization of Islamic Countries, they have had so many conferences. The Arab League Summit, they have had so many conferences. Because there's no single leadership, political leadership. Nobody will solve the problem of Palestine today. So until these two issues have been addressed, we Muslims will continue to be like a chess board all over the world. They will kill us here, kill us over there, set us against one another, and the problem will continue, and the weakness will always be there. That's simple. And that is the reason why all of us we have to work towards this. Remove the fact that what concerns us about Nigeria and the Nigerian force. We should remove it. We should be concerned about the affair of the Muslim. And the second one is we should work for the re-establishment of the political leadership of Islam. Another thing. Meanwhile, my question to the speaker is: you mentioned the issue of Arabic as a language.
No.
You also mentioned the issue of ijtihad process. But today, perhaps I may be wrong, people so much promote the fact that, oh, I want my child, before you even get to the age of 50, you should have memorized Quran. We have so many Arabic speakers, more than we have ever had it before. So many people are speaking Arabic, so many people have memorized Quran. Why is this still a problem? And for the question regarding the issue of ijtihad, today you see fatwa flying all over the collection of the imams and this thing in Saudi Arabia, they give fatwa and they say this. Either will you find any issue, just go on Google now. Fatwa on gay and lesbianism, fatwa on this, you see fatwa. What the difference between fatwa and ijtihad? Because for these two, these are the manifestations that we see among the Muslims. But yet, our problem still persists. That's all the problem.
Well, I mean,
But any other comments? If there's no comment, you answer these questions first before.
okay. So, Jazakallah Khan for the comments and the question. So, regarding the question, that the first one regarding Arabic language and memorization of the Quran, that despite all this, that why is the problem still persisting? Now, we could you tend to understand that for a very long period of time, for centuries, hundreds of years, there's this gap between Muslim scholarship and reality on ground. Now, so because of this gap, what is actually being learned now in terms of the Arabic language, in terms of the Quran, is not what the Muslims of the past actually used in attaining all the whole invention and advancements in technology that they had then. First, if you look at the curriculum that is being used, most of this curriculum are being designed by the West, because when the state was destroyed, when they colonized Muslim lands, it is Western, it is the West in collaboration with some Muslims that studied abroad that designed this curriculum, such that the curriculum is tailored to just some aspects of Islam, not aspect of Islam that require you to think critically to solve a problem using the Quran and the Sunnah. Now, if we look at, just take an example of Islamic banking system, for example, current Islamic banking system. The Muslims of the past, when if they discover a problem, they look at the Quran to see, okay, what is how can we solve this problem in the Quran or the Hadith or the statements of the Prophet Sallallahu. But what scholars do these days, you see, professors, what they do these days is that, okay, there is this banking system by the West. How can we Islamize the banking system? So rather than what does Islam says about banking itself, go to the root of it. Now they are now looking at the solution of the West, now trying to bring Islamic fatwa or Islamic rulings that will support some of the things that the Westerners have brought up. And that is the biggest mistake that the scholars have made. And this is because of the gap that has been created. So even the lack of insurance, for example, insurance is not allowed. I was hearing of uh, tak- uh, Takafu. I said, "Ah, this is Islamic insurance." I was trying to look for details about it. I said, now I don't know why scholars of these days, once you see a solution that the West has provided, will now look for rulings in Islam to support it or to Islamize it. But this was not this was not what the Muslims of the past did. So that is the problem that we have, that we are facing.